I hope this lesson works. There's only one way to find out, isn't there? Flipping you round, I shouldn't be singing. Hello Science Lines, my name is Lara. I am full of energy on the inside, but you can probably hear that my voice is going, so I'm going to be like super cool, low, chill Lara today, okay? It's a bit of a different lesson. Quite often we do an activity. I said to bring paper and a pen. We're going to draw a terrible map and talk about how the Vikings traded. It's not about the map being good. It's about getting a sort of roughly vague idea of where Scandinavia is, because the Vikings came from Scandinavia, but what even is that? And they traded with people in like North Africa, so how did they do that? It's super fun times for me, because I did this lesson yesterday and suddenly realised that you can't, I don't think, flip the screen anymore on Facebook. So I've just been practicing drawing a rubbish map, but also a rubbish map backwards. So hopefully you can see that forwards. I'm rubbing this off now. I know. We're gonna attempt to draw it again, and hopefully, when you've drawn your own and I've drawn the second one, then it'll all make sense. And now, when we look at pictures of Scandinavia and we hear about how the Vikings used to trade stuff, we'll be like, oh yeah, I understand that. Right, you have got a piece of A4 paper with you. I'm going to draw around this bit of A3 paper so that I've got the dimensions right. Oh, look at me refilling my pens. Oh yeah. Can you please? I'm drawing backwards, okay? So you can pick me up on mistakes, but don't laugh at me too hard. Can you draw the British Isles? The British Isles, I'm just going to say it's like a sort of ghost playing football. There we go. British Isles, that's where we'll start. I-S-L-E, weird word, isn't it? Isles. Okay, so that's the British Isles. We quickly need to draw in Scandinavia. Last week, we talked about like a grassland where 6,000 years ago, the Indo-European people were speaking this language called Proto-Indo-European, and then we think they spread out across the world and took their language with them, which is why in India you've got words that are quite similar to words that like in Italian and English, because they're all part of this same ancient language that got spread across the world. And so we talked about how this language and these people sort of moved up and up and up and up into Scandinavia, and it turned into eventually Old Norse. So we know that there are people living in Scandinavia in the year 800 who were speaking Old Norse. And last week we also, have you done the British Isles? I'm going to be very, very rude about Scandinavia, but it's for learning reasons. You need to, we'll draw Norway first. Put your pen at the top middle of the page, and you've just got to draw like a kind of little, what is that? Like a worm staring menacingly at the top of the British Isles, okay? Just like that. Norway and Sweden together kind of look like wonky bum cheeks. I know, I'm sorry, but they do kind of look like wonky bum cheeks, and that's really helped me to remember how to draw it. So if you've drawn your sort of creepy worm peeping at the British Isles like, you look tasty, we might come and nick your treasure, then can you draw another, like, sort of, imagine that that's one bum cheek. You need to draw another bigger bum cheek coming down lower like that. Is that right? I think that's right. I think I've done my I need to join my bum cheeks up a bit. That's better. Yeah, that's better. I could have said an upside down love heart, couldn't I? That would have been so much nicer. It's like an upside down love heart, children. Yeah, that's what Norway and Sweden is. So I'll keep going. I'll draw a line up here like this, because that one's Norway, and then I'll chat so that you can finish off. That one's Norway, the smaller side of the love heart. And this one is Sweden. We'll draw Denmark in a bit. Sweden. There we go. So Norway and Sweden are both Scandinavian countries. While you're drawing that, I'll tell you a little bit about just like how the Vikings were living. It's quite difficult to know this because the Vikings travelled all over the world, basically. And where they went, lots of people wrote down what they did. But they weren't actually writing down anything really about their own lives at the start of the Viking Age, the sort of year 800. So it's a bit like how I've got Australian friends, so I think I know what Australians are like, but actually I've only met Australians who have chosen to leave Australia, so I don't really know what Australians are like. It's hard to know what the Vikings were really like, but we've got archaeology and we've got some of the stuff they wrote on runestones. So what I found out is they were mainly living in sort of farms, and it could even be like they really didn't have big towns like we think of as now. They had maybe just individual farms that big families lived on, or maybe like a few farms together, like 20 farms near each other would be a sort of village town. And oh yeah, the best thing I found out was that we've got archaeological evidence that some of the villages moved around. Can you think why? If you've got a farm, you've got a big shed where you keep your cows, you're growing crops, why would you move around? It's because where the cows did their poos in their cowshed, that made the soil really like rich and fertile, so they would move it around so that where the cowshed was, they could grow the crops. And then eventually the villages started settling. They were super into family, so there was one like master of the household, who was usually the husband, but if there wasn't a husband, it would be the oldest brother. Men quite often had more than one female partner and could have children with different women, and that was kind of okay, I think, until the Christians came along. No one thought that was weird, but they would only have one wife, as far as I can tell. And the women and the men did very different jobs, but they both had really important jobs. Okay, are we ready to put in some more stuff? Shall we draw in Finland? Because I'm quite interested in Finland. I'm almost interested in Finland because it's not interesting. Right, if you want to draw another, like, draw like a loop over a bit and then draw a blob like that. That's Finland. Let's write it in. There we go. Yeah, where was I? So, it was like, now when you say women's work, you just sort of think of someone like sewing very quietly by a fire. But in those days, the women's work was equally as important. They were basically like subsistence farming, which means the whole family was kind of focused on just having enough to eat, having clothes to wear, and having shelter over their heads. So it was very much a two-person job. So the man would do a lot of the sort of physical work outside, but in the home, the woman was in charge. I think it's a little bit like how, you know how like you put loads of stuff in a supermarket, but people can't just come and dump stuff at the supermarket because like the food would go off, wouldn't it? Loads of food would go mouldy, like there would be rats, the cold food would melt. Do you know what I mean? So the woman was very much in charge of like organising the household so that basically stuff didn't die and they could all survive, and making all the fabrics and stuff like that. Okay, now we've drawn Finland. Let's talk about Finland, because Finland isn't part of Scandinavia. When we say the Vikings lived in Scandinavia, we mean Norway and Sweden and Denmark, which we haven't drawn on yet. The Vikings did live in Finland a bit, but they didn't really, like they raided Finland a bit, but like the British Isles here was just absolutely chock full of treasure, basically. Just loads of churches that the Anglo-Saxons had put right on the edge here with loads of gold, like waving like, hiya, we've got all this stuff. Finland, it was just sort of like lots of farms and stuff that were spread out. I think it's a little bit like going strawberry picking on a football pitch if there's only like 3 strawberry plants on the field. It's just kind of, it's not as efficient. So they didn't seem to bother with Finland. And if you came last week, this is the nerdiest thing I've ever said. Guys, you won't believe this, right, guys? The national language of Finland, it hasn't evolved from the Proto-Indo-European language. I know, can you believe? National language of Finland, nothing to do with the Proto-European Indo language. So weird, yeah. So even the language is different. So poor Finland, it's a Nordic country, but it's not really part of Scandinavia. Okay, right, we better move on. I've got loads of stuff to say, chums. Oh, okay, I wasn't going to do this, but we'll put Iceland in because this is one of my favourite facts that I've learned. The Vikings used to have like big meetings that were called things. Like a thing in the Viking times was an actual thing. It was a big meeting, and it was to sort out all kinds of different stuff. Like a lot of the stuff that we sort of fuss about today, like if your neighbour had built something but you thought it was on your land, you'd go to the thing and tell people. Or they were really big into inheritance, who was going to inherit what when people died, so you'd go to the thing to talk about that. They did loads of religious stuff at the thing. If we went back to the Viking times, we wouldn't have a clue what was happening, because apparently there was so much ritual involved. They go to these big meetings and there was like a very special order and you had to do things a very special way. But yeah, it was called a thing. And all things were meetings where all free people could go. So in Iceland, right, which is sort of over here, you can just put a bit, it's not to scale, is it? You can put a big thing up here. Iceland didn't have any people on it until the Vikings found it. And in Iceland, there's a national park called Thingvellir. Huh? Because it was where the thing was. They held a big thing in Thing. I know. Right, we'd better move on. Because we really have to draw Denmark in. Because Denmark is like the most important kingdom in the Viking times. To draw Denmark, we need to draw some other countries. Can you just put like a blob underneath the British Isles for France? We don't really care about France or Spain. There's just the blob under the British Isles is France, and you can do a blob next to France, which is Spain. I'm sorry, Portugal, we're not going to bother with you. We're only really putting in France and Spain because a lot of you live in the British Isles like me, so you've heard of them, and they're attached to Denmark. Oh yeah, I need to start talking to you about markets. I'll do that while you're putting in France and Spain. So there were subsistence farmers, but they had some spare stuff, right? Like maybe you've gone hunting, you've got a load of furs, maybe you've chopped down a load of wood, maybe you've grown some crops and you've got some spare. So they would swap stuff with each other, exchange it, or trade it for other things. But this wasn't, you wouldn't just go around your mate's house and be like, do you want this? You'd go to a special market, because there were lots of people in charge of sort of different tribes. And basically it was quite a good way for them to get taxes. So all along the beaches of Norway and Sweden, there would be what started off as basically just like a beach where you would go and trade your stuff. And then I think it's a little bit like if you've ever been to a really new music festival, the first year you go, it's just like lovely grass and a few different stalls. And then a couple of years later, it's got busy. So they've had to put loads of like wooden boards down so it didn't get too muddy. And then maybe a few years after that, they've got a proper dirt track. It's a bit like that. These tiny little markets on the beaches. Some of them kind of grow and evolve into being quite formal things. Are you ready for some pictures? Okay, cool. Oh, in fact, if you've got a different colour pen, first of all, if you're done, if you work fast, you could start colouring in these bits here in blue, because we need to know which bits are C. Let's use a different coloured pen for some of the towns as well, right? So there was this town called Ribe. Oh, it's on Denmark. We need to draw Denmark in so we can draw this important trading town of Ribe. Are you ready? Someone on Facebook yesterday said that Denmark looked like a little poo that the wonky bum cheeks of Norway and Sweden... That's not me talking. That's one of you lot who said that. But it has really, really helped me to remember where Denmark is. So you just need to draw a line from France. Sorry, Holland and Germany, we don't care about you. Draw a line up from France and just draw like just a little poo that's just come out of Norway and Sweden, and that is Denmark. It's okay to sort of say that Denmark is a poo because they're doing all right. I'll label it in here actually. Denmark is the main kingdom of the Vikings at the time. The Danish king is kind of the most important, and it is because of its little poo-like position. It's because we'll draw all this stuff in later, but in order to like trade, for people to travel through the sea to get to Norway and Sweden, you got to go past Denmark. And Denmark, like we're doing the modern countries, but actually Denmark were in charge of quite a lot of Sweden and quite a lot of Norway as well. So they basically were like the gateway. It's just very easy for them to control everything. So Denmark were the main players at this time. Okay, now we can draw on Ribe. Now we've done our little pile of poo. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of Ribe because we need to make this real for ourselves, don't we? Right, Ribe is here. Yes. Spell R-I-B-E. There's another really important place called Hedeby, which is on the other side. That's even much more important than Ribe. Hedeby. There we go. Sorry about if you can't see it very well. Okay, so while you're drawing on Hedeby and Reeb, I need to quickly tell you about thralls. So you hear this word thrall quite a lot, which these days we say just means enslaved people, people who the Vikings enslaved. They did have thralls. They did have like enslaved people. They would just kidnap people, and then those like enslaved people would be owned by someone. Quite often we find two people buried in a grave, and it's where someone has been buried with the enslaved person that they owned. But the Viking word thrall didn't just mean enslaved person like we think of it today. It could mean a servant as well. And you could buy your freedom, so you weren't enslaved anymore. But if you had slavery in your family tree, you sort of didn't have the same rights as other people. So they had all these different like complicated layers, from what we think of as enslaved people, thralls, right at the bottom, through sort of people who were free but they were only just free, and then there were people who rented land, and then about 3% we reckon of the Vikings would have been landowners, and then there were lords above them and kings. We think maybe one of the reasons why they wanted people to be free is because free people can like pay taxes and stuff. So it's quite good to have free people in your country because you can get money off them. So this lord in Reeb is like, all right, I'm going to say you lot can have about two football pitches worth of land, and people can come here and trade, and I'll protect you so no one nicks your stuff, but you've got to give me some of the money. So this starts up in Reeb, and there's a Viking Age museum in Reeb, and some wonderful person has taken pictures of the models there, so I get to show you them. So yeah, there was like 2 football pitches worth of land, quite music festival-esque I feel, with a sort of wooden path down the middle, and people could park their boats up, and then look, I'll show you. Here you go. Thank you so much, Wolfgang Sauber. So this would be the coastline where they pull the little boats up, and then this is the wooden path down the middle, and you have all your little tents selling stuff. So people would come to swap and trade and exchange things here, and it just grew and grew and grew. There's a ship. We'll talk more about ships. We'll talk all about the different kind of ships next week. And here is a picture of a Viking oven, because I just thought it was cool. Nice little insight into the sort of things they used to have. So we've got Reeb, Hedeby. We've also got another big town going back to the map. Oh yeah, Birka. Birka's massive. Birka's a proper big deal, so we better put that on as well. That is about here. Birka. There we go. Oh, actually, look, we can join Denmark up here to this bit of Finland now. Come up here to the very end of Finland that we've just sort of left hanging. You need to do a little sausage like that, okay? And then, at the moment, we've left Denmark. There's got a little line at the end of this pile of poo, and we've got the end of this little sausage here. Are you all right? So all I've done is put my pen at the end of Finland and curved it around like that. And then we're just going to join up Finland to Denmark without worrying too much about all the countries that are there. There we go. Brilliant. So this is where, if you've got a blue pen, you might want to start drawing in some water, because it's getting a bit confusing, isn't it? So this here is the Baltic Sea. And you don't need to write this on, but I've just learned it, so I'm showing off. This little sausage here is the Gulf of Finland. There we go. Is that starting to make a bit more sense, isn't it? So all this is water, because we need to talk about how the Vikings traded, because they traded by boat. Yeah? I said to bring a yellow pen, because you might want to draw some. You might want to draw some coastline around the bum cheeks. Sorry, the upside down heart of Scandinavia, because that was where all the markets were. Okay. Oh, that's really cleared things up, hasn't it? Oh yeah, that's so much better now. Cool. Right. So. Last week, I showed you a picture of the Caspian Sea. We get to draw the Caspian Sea onto our map now. There we go. That's all right, isn't it? I think this is all right. Do you need me to chat a little bit about other stuff, or should we just get going? Should we put in the seas? Because I'll have a little chat at the end, so if you haven't finished, you can finish off. Over here in this corner, this is where the Caspian Sea is, just over here. I'll write Casp Sea. There we go. Oh, it's all coming together, isn't it? Because that's where the Caspian steppe was. You remember the grassland from last week? Caspian Sea. There we go. And you also need to draw in the Black Sea, which is sort of over here a bit. Black Sea. I strongly encourage you to go to Google Maps after this and zoom in on all this stuff and work out where we've gone horribly wrong, okay? Over here in the just on the very corner of the Black Sea is this incredibly important, massive city that the Vikings were really excited by and travelled to. And we need to talk about how they travelled there, because there isn't a continuous stretch of water going from Scandinavia to this big, beautiful city where the Vikings visited. So I want you to think about, you set off on a boat from Norway, you come down here, you go through the river. How did the Vikings cross land on their boats? That's what I'm asking you. Yeah, basically the Vikings are trading with each other, they're nicking each other's stuff. And they just get greedy. Well, not even greedy, like it pays off. They start expanding. So they start travelling further and further and further. In fact, there's a group of Vikings who sort of travel down here and actually set up a sort of like camp that grows into a town, which we call the Rus people. And we think that that is sort of the start of Russia. Well, that's where we get the word Russia from. Okay, can you draw Turkey, which is just kind of hugging the Black Sea? There we go. This is the song that I was whistling before I started the lesson, because a big city in Turkey at the moment is Istanbul. It had the name Istanbul for like years and years and years and years, so they renamed it again. But in between, we used to call it Constantinople, and there's this song, Istanbul was Constantinople. But anyway, it's a really big city in Turkey. If you watch my Roman lessons, then it used to be like the capital of one of the Roman empires. I'll draw the city on now. So here's where, well, it used to be called Constantinople. It's now called Istanbul, but the Vikings had an immense word for it. They used to call it Miklagard. God, what a great name, Miklagard. Istanbul was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul. But in the Viking times, they used to call it Miklagard. And that's because Miklagard meant the great city. So we've talked about, like, Birka was probably the most important, like, trading town in the Viking times. That was the big, bustly centre where it all was happening. Birka probably has between 500 and 1,000 people in it. 500 people in like the biggest, most bustly town. Europe wasn't a major player in the world at this time. So Birka had between 500 and 1,000 people. Miklagard had, minimum, as far as I can tell, about 300,000 people. So it was incredibly big and shiny and important, and it had loads of cool stuff that the Vikings wanted. Miklagard had this enormous building, which is now called the Hagia Sophia, which used to be a church, and then later on it turned into a mosque, so they added some minarets. But here is an actual picture of the actual building. If you ever been to like a Viking museum and you've seen the little Viking huts, yeah, sometimes quite long huts, but sort of buildings that are pretty small, made out of wood. Imagine being a Viking, sailing all the way to Miklagard, the great city, and being faced with this. Look at that. So these minarets were added on later, but the Vikings would have seen that, this just like gorgeous, massive, shiny building. They were very, very excited by Miklagard. Look, I can't believe, I was so excited when I found this out. It actually has Viking graffiti in it still to this day, and we reckon it's just like our graffiti. It just sort of says, I was here kind of thing. But how gorgeous is that? You recognise some of those runes from last week. But how are they going to get there? Well, can we keep drawing? So, they reckon, just to sort of give you a bit of an idea, that we've got travellers who've told stories who sort of from up here in Norway down to Hedeby was about a 5 to 7 day journey, I reckon. So that gives you some idea of how long it took. So if you were in, say, Norway, and you had a big ship full of fur and wood and maybe some walrus tusks that you'd got from Iceland, and you wanted to take them down to Miklagard to swap them for other cool stuff, what you're going to do. You're going to travel through the Baltic Sea. You're going to go through this little sausage, which is the Gulf of Finland. If you want to get your blue pen, if you're sort of keeping up with me, then there's a little river coming out of the Gulf of Finland, and this leads to a very convenient lake. And then there's a river that comes out of that lake. And this is where I sort of can't remember, and I suppose the details don't really matter. But there's quite a few other lakes and rivers that sort of go down here. Look, you can look it up on the map. But you don't have water all the way to Miklagard. There is some land. So and there's also, in fact, yeah, up here in what is now the Ukraine, there's some rapids. I'll draw those on with a big exclamation mark. Oh no, rapids! You can't go through the rapids. There's a major problem. You just can't. It's too dangerous. What are you going to do? What you're going to do? Well, what they used to do is, if it was a small bit of land, they would just drag the ship. Like big Viking blokes, right? Very fit and strong. You just get out of your boat and you just drag it. Sometimes they'd sort of put wood on the ground. So we think actually sometimes in the Viking sagas, little bits of land were just called the sea. It was just a kind of natural part of the journey, was you just get out and drag it. I have read stories about them carrying their ships as well. Just get out, just lift it up. I mean, we'll talk about ships next week and how they were sort of designed for this to be able to happen. But yeah, one of the reasons they were so fantastic at sort of, they traded so far and wide and got so rich is because if they got to rapids that no one else could cross because they're too dangerous, you just haul the boat out, carry it around, carry on your journey. So that's how they eventually got to Miklagard. Whew, there we go. Their relationship with Miklagard was a bit of a strange one. So they did trade with them. Miklagard, they would pick up stuff that we like now. Well, if you're in the British Isles like me, stuff that we still get, like spices and wine and silver, a lot of silver. In fact, the silver bangle that I showed you last week that someone had scratched their name on, a lot of the silver coins that they were using up here, or silver jewellery that they had, would have been made from silver that they picked up in Miklagard. They liked Miklagard, they would trade with Miklagard, but if they noticed that Miklagard was sort of unguarded or distracted, they would just get in there and start fighting and try and burn it to the ground and nick all the stuff. They did that a couple of times. In fact, they did that so often that the leader of Miklagard actually hired some Vikings in to protect Miklagard from the other Vikings. So yeah, complicated relationship. But Miklagard, that's where they would pick up, I'm saying it because I've got a quiz in a sec. That's where they would pick up wine, spices, silver, and that's where the people of Miklagard would get from the Vikings stuff from up here, like wood, fur. I kept reading about honey. Loads of sort of fairly reliable places said that the Vikings would bring honey to Miklagard, and I was like, well, they've got bees, haven't they, in Turkey? Why would they need Viking honey? And also the Vikings famously drank mead for special occasions, which meant that surely honey was sort of quite a special ingredient. I don't know. And actually Norway and Sweden weren't fantastic for farming. But anyway, I don't know. If anyone can tell me which way honey was going, were they just swapping honey? I don't know. Anyway, if you want to finish off, we'd better join Norway up like that. Turkey goes a bit further than that, actually, I think. I think Turkey goes up to there. I don't know. Do that. It doesn't matter. We're finished. Oh, we didn't draw Italy. Oh, poor Italy. Oh, let's just put Italy in. So Italy is a boot, isn't it? That is pointing towards France, like that. And then you can put a little hump there if you want to draw Greece, but we don't care about Greece today. Wow, that's the worst Italy I've ever drawn. There you go. Sorry, Italy. For completion's sake. And then all this is blue as well. There. Okay, so next week we will talk about all the different ships that they used to use, because they didn't just have one kind of boat, they had loads of kind of boats. And then the week after that, we'll talk about when they invaded Britain and how Britain felt about that. Okay. Phew. Right. Yeah, I think that's everything. Are you ready for your little quiz? Your 5 questions. Right. Here we go. Which kingdom, chums, was the most powerful in the Viking Age? Was it A, Finland, B, Sweden, C, Norway, or D, Denmark? Don't forget, please. This quiz is mainly for me to check that I've taught you correctly, because some of it, maybe I didn't say it enough. If you do really badly in this quiz, that means I need to improve how I teach it. Sorry to use you like that. Which kingdom was the most powerful in the Viking Age? It was Denmark. The Danes kind of ruled the roost because they were just in the best position to control all the trading. Which of these countries is not in Scandinavia? It's a Nordic country, but it's not in Scandinavia. Confusingly, a lot of people in this country do speak Scandinavian languages. But the main language of this country isn't even related to Proto-Indo-European. The answer is... Stop singing, Laura, you got a sore throat. Finland had some Vikings in it, but not technically a Scandinavian country. Which place was called the Great City by the Vikings? Population of at least 300,000. Was it A, Hedeby, B, Constantinople, C, Baghdad, or D, Norway? Baghdad, the capital of Iraq, was also a huge city in the time of the Vikings. It's just underneath the sort of Caspian Sea on your map. But the answer is Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul, which the Vikings called Miklagard. Oh, such a cool word. What did the people of Constantinople buy from the Vikings? What did the people of Constantinople, or Miklagard, buy from the Vikings? Was it A, silver, B, wine, or C, fur? It's a bit of a tricksy one, this, because if you'd gone to Miklagard in the time of the Vikings, to that gorgeous, massive city, you would have seen silver and wine and fur getting traded. So the people of Constantinople had plenty of silver and wine. They wanted fur from the Vikings, or wood as well. One more question. The Vikings traded with Turkey because Scandinavia is connected to Turkey by a continuous stretch of water. Is that true or false? Hopefully you're thinking that that's quite a simple question now, but I definitely wouldn't have been able to answer that a week ago, to be honest with you. I think I would have said, well, yeah, if the Vikings traded with Turkey, there must have been just like loads of rivers connecting Scandinavia with Turkey. Obviously, because the Vikings travelled in boats. It's false, isn't it? Yeah, they used to get to little bits of land and then just get out and walk. Just carry the boat. Simples. God, so weird. It's called portage. If you portage your ship, then you carry it, I suppose. Make it portable. Right, you lot. That is the end. Oh, do you know what? I'm actually really happy with that. I know it was a lot of talking. You've done very well if you managed to listen to me going on and on and on whilst multitasking and drawing that map. It was a heavy lesson today. It wasn't the same as our usual lesson, but it's one of those lessons where I feel really happy that because whenever you read about the Vikings, you read about places like Birka, and I'm constantly reading about, oh, they like had some glass beads that are from Baghdad, and I wouldn't have understood really what that meant in my head. And now I do. Baghdad is like here, by the way. Sorry, Baghdad, couldn't fit you on. Right, you lot, I'm going to go. I'm going to go and rest my voice. If you happen to be new, you can sign up to pay my wages. It is the most wickedest business model that we just made up in lockdown. Basically, just home educators just all chip in, and that pays my wages. So all my lessons are free. And that is literally the only way now that anyone in my house makes money. So if you want to sign up to support me, you get sent really nice stuff. I'm so bad at... I never post about this. But how the business model works is all my lessons are free, printouts free, stored for watching on catch up for free. If you want to pay me for that, because it's a lot of work, then you can sign up to support me and I'll send you some nice stuff. I'll send you Theatre Science magazine. This one is about mould. You can do an activity, grow some mould, identify it. There's a choose your own adventure. There's a gorgeous comic about the discovery of penicillin. I'll send you some rainbow glasses. I'll send you a little model of a satellite that I sent all my supporters before Christmas, but I still had some left. I'll send you some more glasses that I sent them before Christmas that are so cool. I'm not even going to tell you what they do. You just need to follow the instructions. And quite a lot of other cool stuff as well. I think you get like a little bag of... Yeah, I'm going to send you a lot of cool stuff if you sign up to support my lessons, because clearly this is the best job ever. Okay, yeah, thank you for paying my wages, and I'll see you next week for learning about ships. Bye.